Yes, I know. It is very difficult to release a new MMO which hits. It is very difficult to release a spiritual successor to a thing which was already successful that hits. It is very difficult to catch lightning in a bottle twice, but I have a good feeling about Brighter Shores. A good feeling which is probably steeped in just wanting it to be good, so don't take too much stock in that, I guess. But yes, for those of you who do not know, Brighter Shores is an upcoming point-and-click based MMO which very much looks like a spiritual successor to RuneScape, which first released in 2001 under the design of Andrew Gower and his brothers Paul and Ian Gower. Andrew Gower eventually departed Jagex, a company he founded in 2010, and has since stated that he regretted selling the company immensely. I've recently been reading the first 20 years of RuneScape book, which I grabbed when it first came out and then promptly didn't read, because that's the kind of guy that I am. And it really is. A lot of this is in the 15-year documentary of RuneScape as well. It really is impressive watching the beginning of RuneScape, how like, you hear this kind of thing all the time, but like how it started in Andrew Gower's bedroom pretty much, and the things they did to keep the game alive. And I really respect a lot of the early decisions they made, such as, you know, like, oh, we realized we would have to introduce a membership package and keep certain things behind a paid members wall, but we had already promised this massive expansion for everyone, so while a lot of people might have come out and said, oh yeah, that's for members only, and it would probably have benefited us for it to be members only, we made sure that it was still an expansion for free-to-play players, because it wouldn't feel good for them to have that taken away. It's just full of green flags like that. Now, I was actually, thinking the other day while reading this book, I wonder what Andrew Gower is up to nowadays, and I felt a little sad, a little tinge of his regret, I guess. I felt a little empathetic for him in that way about him leaving the company and selling the company. And so honestly, when I first saw Brighter Shores, my first thought was, good for him. Good for him. Hell yeah, let's do this. And my second thought was, wow, that name is a shot over the bow. Holy shit, Brighter Shores? Really? That's a bit on the nose. I find it interesting as well because, from what I can tell, Andrew Gower still has fond feelings regarding RuneScape and RuneScape fans. He's been attending Rune Fests. He took part in the 15th year anniversary documentary, and I believe he was probably interviewed for the 20th year book, although I don't actually know that for certain. They may just have taken things from previous interviews. I think he has openly stated in the past about his dislike of where the game went in terms of microtransactions, so it's probably a statement on that. Anyway, let's look at Brighter Shores itself. There are two things that stick out to me when I first look at images and video of this game. Firstly, I do really like the art style. It feels like a natural evolution of the original RuneScape art style all those years ago. It reminds me a little bit of Divinity Original Sin as well, which is not a bad thing. I feel like Divinity Original Sin carries a lot of that isometric, comedic fantasy RPG vibe that RuneScape has, despite being a different genre of game. The second thing I notice is that the tile-based system, which is also in RuneScape, is actually indicated graphically on the floor, no matter where you are, wherever you go. There are tiles on the floor, and I don't actually like this. I've seen people saying that they do like this. I do not. I'm not a huge fan. In my opinion, that's a little bit immersion breaking. Andrew has also stated on Twitter that combat is not based on a tick-based timing system like it is in RuneScape, and people have noted that enemies can spawn in between tiles, and they walk around a little bit more fluidly than from tile to tile, despite the fact that player movement will be tile to tile. So there's a little bit of confusion based around that. I do wonder what the point is of a tile-based system if, the enemies the enemies aren't strictly limited to a tile-based system, maybe, or the combat isn't on a tick-based system. Why are we then limiting it to a tile-based system? But this isn't exactly a deal breaker for me. This is a nitpick. All of the things I have to say about this game that aren't positive are just nitpicks. I'm sure I'll very quickly grow used to it. I think maybe they were going for a bit of a what was that game that did really well, that indie game Into the Breach. Yeah, looking at the kind of miniature size of the overall maps as well, it's like you have these small sets of tiles in which you're in these areas. It reminds me a little bit of Into the Breach. And again, that's another thing which I think potentially takes away from immersion somewhat, but it's fine. Now let's read through the Steam store page text, which I'm pretty sure has everything the trailer says and a little bit more. Brighter Shores is an all-new adventure from award-winning MMORPG designer Andrew Gower. Explore a land of magic and mysteries with a huge number of professions to try, and something you'd find around every corner. Brighter Shores features an ongoing story and hundreds of hours of gameplay. So a few things to talk about there right off the bat. Obviously, we're going to have some A to B synonym changes. So we don't have skills anymore, we have professions, and we'll see that with some of the professions on offer. Unavoidable, of course, but, it takes me out of it a little bit. I'm like, oh, okay, so we're not A anymore, we're B. Got it. Bright Shores features an ongoing story. I'm very curious about this ongoing story. I am very much a story enjoyer. I wonder if the story is going to be told through a quest system similar to RuneScape, which is very highly celebrated, or if they're going to go for something more traditional in terms of quests in MMOs. I know that Paul Gower is obviously on the team, and he had the hand in shaping RuneScape's earliest lore, and I do like RuneScape's lore, so hopefully he's able to transfer that success over to this game as well. And finally, the claim that it features hundreds of hours of gameplay is interesting for a few reasons. Firstly, later on we will see that it is an episodic release, which is an interesting way of not saying early access. And I have a lot more thoughts on that, which we'll get to, but I have to wonder, is it hundreds of hours at release, or is it hundreds of hours as things go on? And the other thing is, Andrew Gower has said that he wants to make this game a little bit less grindy than RuneScape, or at least less grindy than games of its style. He means RuneScape. RuneScape players will tell you that they like the grind, and I worry a little bit about, like, if it's less grindy, is it going to be over too quickly? But then I also remember the XP curve in RuneScape, and how, I've been reading how in the earliest days of RuneScape, there wasn't any content for each skill past level 40, because they didn't expect anyone to get to level 99. So I'm wondering as well, if it's just like, they're addressing that. We don't even know, like, what the level curve on professions is going to be, or what the level cap on professions is going to be. Still a lot of unknowns at this point, which is very exciting. I've never considered the idea of what if they did RuneScape again, what would they change? And that's exactly what this is, I think. Okay, let's keep reading. A land of magic and mysteries. As the newest recruit in the Hopeport Town Guard, you are looking to make a name for yourself. This soon turns out to be a more challenging role than you had anticipated, with a strange storm raging over the harbour and unrest from the local goblins. I'm reminded of the many times that they tried to reinvent the beginning player experience, while the Gowers were there and long afterwards as well. Hopeport sounds a little generic. I think there are some names in here which do sound a little generic. But then Edgeville was pretty generic too, so, it was a village at the edge of a map, so. You will discover powerful magic sources and become one of the legendary classes of old, Cryonite, Guardian, or Hammer Mage, which is fortunate, because something is corrupting the deepest reaches of the nearby Hope Forest, and only through the strength of your newfound powers will you be able to deal with it. So, we will become one of the legendary classes of old. That's interesting. So combat professions, I guess, are separate from normal professions. That might sound obvious for a normal MMO, but in RuneScape, every combat skill is just another skill. You can be everything on one character, and it sounds like you might not be able to be everything on one character in this game, which is interesting because it encourages rolling alts. Rolling alts in an MMO like RuneScape is something that is done, do not get me wrong, but it's usually at the player's own behest in terms of coming up with different challenge mode runs, like trying out Iron Man, which did become an official mode, or like Bronze Man, or, playing a game one tile at a time, that kind of crazy thing. So it's interesting to me. Also, one of my nitpicks, I don't like Hammer Mage. I wish we had like a more traditional style of mage. This just looks like a guy wielding two hammers, and I wonder how he's a mage, and what the traditional mage archetype will look like inside the game's lore. That being said, I probably will go for Cryonite, because I've always been kind of melee focused in RuneScape, and I do like the sword and board combo, and I don't usually go for it in MMOs because that usually means tanking, and I don't like tanking in MMOs, or at least I don't know how to tank in MMOs. I haven't done tanking in MMOs, and if this follows the RuneScape formula, we're not going to have the combat, triangle in terms of like running dungeons with other people. Maybe we will, but I don't think that's what they're going for here. A huge number of professions. Learn a diverse range of professions such as fisher, forager, chef, woodcutter, miner, alchemist, stonemason, merchant, blacksmith, and many more. So they haven't revealed all of them here. I am noting that, the different characters in these different screenshots seem to be wearing different outfits that look appropriate for the profession that they're doing. And I wonder, are we getting profession-related gear? Could it be as well that maybe Andrew Gower has seen the Final Fantasy XIV job system and has gone, wow, that's cool. That would be cool if I could apply that to a RuneScape style game. So like, I don't know, you click a button and then your equipment changes to that profession and you're, labeled as being of that profession or whatever. Now, a lot of these are analogous to RuneScape ones. You've got woodcutter instead of woodcutting, miner instead of mining, fisher instead of fishing. Then you've got some interesting ones. Like, I guess alchemist is probably herblore, right? Forager. What's forager? It wouldn't be a farming replacement, unless you're just going around farming wild growths out in the environment instead of growing your own. More interestingly, what does a stonemason do? I could look this up, but like the idea of what a stonemason's role would be in a RuneScape style world. The image has a man chiseling kind of like a stone chalice out of a stone block. Would you maybe be creating these altars to worship for various buffs maybe? Or is this literally just a purely cosmetic thing? Is there going to be player housing involved? They haven't mentioned that. Then we've got merchant. Merchant is a profession. That's interesting. We have a man stood looking at a shopkeeper. There was some talk, I believe, in the RuneScape community around 2009, 2010 about player-run shops. And I can't remember if this was an idea floated by the community or an idea floated by Jagex. And I'm wondering if this has something to do with that. But I have to wonder, how would leveling up work in that kind of a system? Is it going to be a Skyrim style system where just like the more you sell and buy, the better you become at speechcraft and therefore the better prices become for you overall? Like, am I reading too much into this and it's just basically that? I don't know. It's interesting though. Moving on, we have fascinating wildlife. Encounter a huge variety of fantastical foes over the course of your adventures. And we have a very spiky porcupine looking thing. We have what looks to be some kind of gnome or dwarf, but it's made out of blue slime and it's wielding a wrench. That's interesting. Is there going to be some kind of pandemic which turns people into blue slime? Some kind of fantasy virus? And then we've got this very weird looking lad who's basically just a humanoid, but there's no head. The head is the torso and the face is on the torso, and he looks very hungry. Discover an ongoing story. I'm doing a voice now. The game will be constantly expanding, with new content being released in an episodic format. Each episode features its own unique side quests, professions, and lands, as well as advancing the central story. Now that's interesting, because I have just picked up on some language there that I did not the first time I read it. Okay, so firstly, to talk about the episodic structure. Games which have previously had episodic structures as part of their marketing haven't done very well. People may balk at the idea of an episodic MMO, but I think that's what RuneScape was originally, it just wasn't called that. If you go back and look at the earliest maps of RuneScape's release game, you will see these black borders around areas which you know there to be content after. And literally, if you'd go there in the world, there would be these black walls, like, stopping you from progressing. Then as updates came out for the game, content would be inserted there. Suddenly, the bridge past Seer's Village would go to the Fremennik area with all of the Fremennik story. And I think that's basically what they're doing here. They're just actually putting a label on it. And the label isn't early access. And I kind of respect that. This game has been 10 years in the making. Looking back through Andrew Gower's tweets, you get the impression that most of that has been engine work up until at least 2018, but I'm just purely speculating there. But yeah, I don't think to fans of RuneScape this should be anything weird or different or alien. I think this is what we're used to be perfectly honest. I think you could say RuneScape still is episodic. It's just not necessarily episodic in a way where we know what updates are coming when, at least if we're talking about RuneScape 3. Now, the interesting thing I noted about this is each episode features its own unique side quests, professions, and lands, and that makes me wonder if certain professions are going to be locked to certain areas of the world, and it's just going to be like, this is the area of the world where you go and learn this. This is the area of the world where you go and learn this. I'm also wondering if professions are notably different to classes, and if there are no plans for further classes to be added to the game. But it is extremely early days. Either way, as an MMO, I like the idea of episodically released content, instead of like waiting 2 years for an expansion. Anyway, the final thing on this page is Premium Pass. There are hours and hours of content you can play for free. However, if you want more stories, professions, and places to explore, you can buy a Premium Pass. A Premium Pass gives you many benefits, including access to all released episodes. And then we've got a little chart, and for free we get Hope Port and Hope Forest. And then everything else is for the Premium Pass, including the Mine of Mantuban, Chronopolis, a unique character name, which is a bit weird, exclusive armor dies, changing your name, and player-to-player trading. So the free version of the game really does feel a lot more like a free trial than maybe early versions of free-to-play RuneScape did, at least looking at this chart. Honestly, I'm fine with this. I think this game probably, if they're doing an episodic, content structure release, then I think Premium Pass would probably benefit that, having subscribers paying monthly or whatever. There was a time in my life when I was annoyed at MMOs still pushing subscriptions, but of course, the world has gone more the subscription route as things have gone on, and I think Andrew Gower deserves a look, at least as in terms of like the game designer. In terms of games he releases, I'll show up for them, I'll check out what they are. One thing you might notice is conspicuously missing is the price, and I would bet that's because they are still figuring that out. But I would like it, obviously this is going to sound very obvious, I would like it if it was cheaper than maybe people expected. I would like it if they were banking on, hey, like judging on the amount of wish lists, maybe this has got a lot of attention. Based on the pedigree of the lead designer, maybe this has got a lot of attention. Maybe we can just charge people like £5 a month instead of £10 a month for this game, and we'll do fine. But of course, I don't make that game, I don't work at that company, I don't know how possible that may or may not be. I'm reminded of the fact that RuneScape back in the day was £3.50 a month, and it is now £10 a month or something like it. And yeah, I would like a return to the older days where the game cost a little bit less, maybe. So yeah, that's all the Steam page tells us so far. As you can tell, I am fascinated. One last thing I will mention, this was built on a engine that Andrew Gower made from scratch, as I've already alluded to. A lot of people aren't happy with that because they've heard about people complaining about how hard it was to come to terms with. I guess it's called RuneScript or something, the RuneScape engine, and apparently that has caused a lot of issues over the years. I'm of the personal opinion that maybe Andrew Gower has learned from his programming mistakes in terms of what it's like to make your own programming language or whatever, or engine, sorry, probably different things those two. I'm not a programmer, can you tell? And B, I still think RuneScape is a good game right now that I enjoy playing, so I don't think it's the end of the world if he's done it again. What I am seeing in this Steam page is a lot of lessons learned from the first go at RuneScape, so hopefully that carries over to his coding or whatever. The other thing I was going to mention that I almost forgot, player-to-player trading being behind a subscription wall feels very much like a lesson learned from RuneScape, given the amount of difficulties they had with real-world trading, and it makes sense to me that they're like, hey, we're just gonna make it so you have to be a member at least to start trading. It doesn't eliminate all problems, but it certainly adds a gate. I also note that there's no Iron Man mode or whatever mentioned. That was never a Gower invention anyway. I wouldn't be surprised if it was something that they added later down the line, but also I think it wouldn't surprise me if they're like, oh, at launch we want everyone to just be playing with vanilla accounts, obviously. I have one last thing to say in terms of RuneScape. I'm not being like, yes, new RuneScape 4, replace RuneScape. That's not what I am saying. This game is most certainly, a spiritual successor to RuneScape in many ways. It is also its own game, and there are still so many things I want to do in RuneScape. I still love that game so much, despite its many, many flaws, and I want to play both. I haven't seen this happening, but I worry that maybe when a game comes out, if it finds a lot of success, there will be a divide between players who are faithful to RuneScape and faithful to Brighter Shores, and I just hope that doesn't happen. I just hope we can enjoy both. What I really hope, in my most optimistic heart of hearts, is that the existence of Brighter Shores, if it does come out to be super successful, maybe puts a fire up Jagex's asses and gets them to invest a little bit more in RuneScape 3, because you get the impression that maybe they've been pulling away from RuneScape 3 lately, after Necromancy and after the Hero Pass. We're in March and we still don't have a roadmap. They've said that we will be getting a roadmap towards the end of the year and that we will be very busy with lots of things to do. But at the minute, you can't fault the community for feeling like they're putting all their eggs in the old school RuneScape basket after the failure of Hero Pass. Financially speaking, that would not make a whole lot of sense, but that is definitely how it feels to be a RuneScape 3 player right now. But yeah, I'm really excited for Brighter Shores. Still kind of wish it had a different name. Not because it's insulting or anything, I just think it's a name that doesn't really work outside of a context with which it's being announced. Like, oh yeah, get it, Brighter Shores, because it's not going to be hopefully full of microtransactions, or at least not like pay-to-win microtransactions like RuneScape 3 has. Anyway, I forgot what I was saying. I'm just really excited for this. It has become my most anticipated game of the year. I'm so curious, and people are saying it doesn't look as big as RuneScape. Of course not. I think it is launching at a size, and I think 10 years from now, which is very optimistic, but assuming it makes it 10 years, it might look like a very different game, or it might fall flat on its face. It might not be as good. It might not recapture the lightning in a bottle, and I might be getting my hopes up, ready for disappointment. Hopefully that is not the case. Either way, let me know what you think down in that pesky comments section below. Perhaps leave me one of those precious likes if you do so feel like being generous, and subscribe for more content. I do make RuneScape videos if you're not aware, and I will see you in whatever I make next.